Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1939 series, and I'm in this interesting little space here, and it's actually the lift or the elevator. The upholstery is relatively new, but it's always going back to the sanatorium era. It's always had nice upholstery, nice little bench here, and so yeah. Let's go out. Here we are in the third floor, on the third floor corridor. There are the stairs. And here's the lift. And if I turn around, you are going to see the door to Dmitri's room. So let's go inside. Here we go. We've got one door that I'm closing behind me, and then we've got another door with a little gap in between them that's actually big enough to stand in. If anybody wanted to stand between doors, which I doubt. There we have Dmitri and Coco. They have their pictures up in the room. Coco was never here, and they're both quite young. Dmitri did not know her when she was that age. She's very young in that photo. Anyway, I'm going to give you a tour of Dmitri's room after we do the letter excerpt. And yeah, I'm not a good bed maker. I don't actually sleep in here. I come in here usually in the evening and hang out, and sometimes during the day, but usually on sunny days, I go sit out on the balcony. In the evening, I come up here and read or watch a movie or something. I usually live in this room when I'm at Schatzalp, but this year there's some work going on, and it's just more convenient to be in the apartment. Anyway, enough explanation. I'm going to pick up I'll switch hands, pick up my laptop and try to read this while standing up. This is, what is it? It's part 6 of the letter. And our recap from last time, Dmitri had a very bad experience, both at his hotel, the Angleterre, where he was confronted with the fact that his room had to be fumigated when he left. And then because he had TB, and then at the barber because the barber scared him by telling him that all the sanatoriums had closed, which of course wasn't true. So our cast today, we have 3 doctors. Dr. Maurer, who was the head physician here, Dr. Mikhailov, whom we'll hear about, and a certain Dr. X, whose name I can't make out. Dmitri does include it, but I just can't decipher it, his writing in that instance. Okay, so here we go. The examination was really awful. The senior doctor, the one whom Dr. X wrote to about me, looked me over. He is a little Swiss man who, for some reason, speaks with an Italian accent, but he's very nice. It turned out that I was really very far, much too far gone to be funny, ! And that line is actually in English about being much too far gone to be funny. My admission to the sanatorium was arranged for the next day, Sunday, 3rd September. The sanatorium isn't at all like a hospital, but rather a large hotel. I have a big south-facing room with armchairs, a divan, and a wonderful bathroom. The view is truly gorgeous, huge mountains. Now I have to scroll down, sorry. Not very good for planning here. I need 2 fingers instead of just one. There we go. What was he saying? The view is truly glorious, huge mountains already dusted with snow at their peaks, and Davos in the valley below, because we're almost 900 meters above it, 1,800 overall. The valley is covered with splendid green grass and little houses that look like toys, truly beautiful. The mountains are 2/3 covered with evergreen trees and higher up with grass again. A dreary view is not to be seen anywhere. In front of every room is a terrace, and he puts in parentheses, balcony, and these are very large. Each one has a bed and other kinds of wicker furniture. We lie on these beds all day when the weather is good. For example, I myself am lying out on my balcony right now, just enjoying the day. There's an electric cushion at my feet, and I'm wearing pajamas, a sweater, and also a dressing gown because it's 9 degrees Celsius. 5 degrees Reaumur in our Russian reckoning. It's terribly hot in the sun, but we're not allowed to lie in the direct sunlight. Just imagine, sun exposure can cause tuberculous lungs to hemorrhage! Exclamation point. And there I was in Monte Carlo during the summer, right under the nose of Mikhailov. But God is always with him. Okay, so that is it. Let's see. Dr. Maurer, I gave you a little introduction to last time. He could be very charming. He was a bit tyrannical, but he knew how to keep his patients on board. And certainly he was someone that Dmitri liked, but would end up having some difficulties with. Dr. X, well, Dmitri had a doctor in Paris, and he had a specialist that he went and saw in London. So this was probably the specialist in London, whose name was Perrott, Dr. Perrott, P-E-R-R-O-T, was it 2 T's? I can't remember. And Dr. Perrott, I need to set this down. Dr. Perrott ended up sending a bill to Maria because he had not gotten his money from Dmitri. So he sent it to her, and she just forwarded it to Dmitri's secretary. I don't know if he ever got his money or not. Let's hope so. But anyway, Dmitri had consulted with this specialist, whether it was in London or Paris, and the specialist apparently knew Dr. Maurer and wrote to Dr. Maurer about Dmitri, but Dmitri, as we know, had not arranged in advance for his stay at Schatzalp. It was just seemingly kind of a last-minute decision probably because Maria was leaving for the U.S. and the war was imminent, and he was sick enough that he realized that he couldn't just stay in a hotel. And he'll talk about that later. He would have died if he'd just stayed in a hotel and not come to the sanatorium. Okay, so yes, he gets this pronouncement that he is very far gone. But Dr. Maurer, of course, was really optimistic at the time, and Dmitri only found out later exactly how far gone he really was, even though he's already found out that he has advanced TB. But he will fill us in later about the gory details, so to speak, of what the doctor found in the examination. So it would have been a pretty thorough examination. And so I'm sure the reason why Dmitri talks about it having been difficult was both because he was scared at what the doctor was going to find and because it would have been such a thorough examination. I mean, TB can be anywhere in the body. So they would have had to check more than his lungs, and they would have been thumping his chest. They were, doing all kinds of things that probably weren't very pleasant. But anyway, he got through it. Now he talks about Schatzalp. In other places, he'll talk about it as a hospital, but here he tells his sister that it's more like a hotel than a hospital. So is that true? Well, yes and no. It's certainly not like a conventional hospital was or wasn't, because now it's not a hospital at all, but it was, it didn't have the sorts of things that hotels had. It didn't have a bar, it didn't have a piano lounge or anything like that. It did have an operating room, it did have a morgue, but it didn't have the kind of things that a hotel would have in that respect. It didn't have a restaurant, although there was a restaurant right next door. So I just watched the other day the first episode of a Swiss and German co-production of a TV series called Davos 1917. And in that TV series, they combine the sanatorium. The exteriors are done at Schatzalp, and they combine the sanatorium with a kurhaus. So a kurhaus was a resort hotel. And, in the kurhaus, in Davos 1917, they have a casino and they have a bar, and in the same building they also have an operating room, and you have nurses walking around with bloody aprons, and those two things just did not coexist. So the Kurhaus in Davos was owned by the same joint stock company that owned Schatzalp, but it was not up on the mountainside. It was down in town where you would want a Kurhaus to be. So the name does mean, cure. It's from cure, but it didn't have medical facilities. It had a theater. It was a fancy place, an expensive place with lots of socialites. And it had a cinema, it had a theater, it had dancing, it had all kinds of things that you do not have in a sanatorium. So those two things just don't combine very well. But if you were coming to Schatzalp and they didn't have a room for you available yet, you could stay at the Kurhaus and then just go right up the funicular to Schatzalp, the little Schatzalp on the cable car. Or if you had relatives coming to visit you, they could also stay at the Kurhaus. And why Dmitri didn't stay there, I'm not sure. It was where people who planned to be admitted to Schatzalp usually stayed, but it was so, I guess, sudden and spontaneous that he decided to come here that, he didn't stay at the Kurhaus. Anyway, he describes this as being a big room. Well, is it a big room? Compared probably to the usual single-person hospital room, probably. And compared to the other rooms at Schatzalp, some of them, there are bigger rooms. There are suites, and there are corner rooms that are fancy and much bigger than this. But on the other hand, and I've often thought that his description sounds to me more like those corner rooms, but then he so explicitly singles out this room in the photograph he sent to Maria of the outside of Schatzalp with an arrow pointing to his room and saying, "Ma chambre, this is my room." So anyway, go figure. This room, it had a hospital bed. So this bed that you see is a double bed, and it would have had a fairly narrow conventional hospital bed in it. So that would have opened up more room. There are two chairs in the room. Let's see. There are three chairs in the room. Only one of them has arms. And traditionally, the hospital bed would be here against this narrow wall. And so you would have this whole other area that you could definitely have the divan and the two armchairs. Okay, let's see what next. Sorry, I'm ducking out of the frame here. Okay, well, I'm kind of doing this tour as we go. The bathroom. These rooms did not have bathrooms originally. None of the rooms in the sanatorium had bathrooms. Those were put in later. So there were some granddaughters of Queen Victoria who stayed here in 1903, and not even they had bathrooms in their rooms. So one of them was Dmitri's cousin, Ducky, who he clashed with on more than one occasion. She was here in 1903. So here's the bathroom. You've got this kind of Art Deco tile design, and you've got the bathtub here. And the question is, did Dmitri die in this bathroom? Because the story that I've always heard is that he was found dead in the bathroom on a Thursday morning, March 5th in 1942. He had been, his TB, his pulmonary TB was in remission. He had been cleared to leave the sanatorium, but then they found him dead on the bathroom floor. Well, is that true or not? I don't know. I don't know. As it turns out, in all likelihood, consistently and from the most reliable sources, he died of kidney failure. I would guess it was probably tuberculosis of the kidneys. But whether he then died in bed or really did, get up and go to the bathroom and collapse in there, I don't know. Anyway, what next? The big room. Okay, the balconies. Well, Yeah, okay. The balconies. He says, as he's sitting out on his balcony writing this, it's 9 degrees. So that's 40. So what is that, like 1940? 1940. That's like 48 degrees in Celsius. Or I'm sorry, in Fahrenheit. So it's about the same temperature that we have here today on May 12th, I think. So it's not great weather for May, but I'm going out on the balcony. The balcony also has the double doors, and there are steps going down into the room or up to the balcony, and that is an architectural innovation to maximize the amount of sunlight that the room gets every day. Whoa, here I go. Okay, so I'm out on the balcony. Pretty amazing view. My camera always cuts off the top of the mountains, but anyway, there's clouds today, so you can't really see them. This is the room next door. The balcony opens up into. There's a door here on going to this other balcony that the doctors would go through. Any of you who have read The Magic Mountain remember the man's description of how the doctors would go from balcony to balcony on these little doors so they didn't have to disturb patients. So it's in the middle of forest, as you can see, and Dmitri refers to the grass, the amazing, beautiful green grass, the meadows, the tree line, all of those interesting things. This is not a bed. He refers to these at first, in that first letter, as beds, and then he doesn't anymore. These are called Liegestühle. So there are 2 on this balcony, and they're very comfortable and very nice. I wish I had one back in the U.S. I should get one. What else do you have? The wicker furniture. Obviously not the same wicker furniture from the sanatorium era. You do find odds and ends at Schatzalp that are still absolutely the original, including some of the tables out on the balcony that are identical to ones in a picture I have of Dmitri on the balcony. And here, this window goes to the bathroom, so you get natural light in the bathroom. And yeah, it's just in the sun, it's absolutely wonderful. But Dmitri's quite right. If you didn't have clouds today, it would be hot. It would be hot out here. And it's interesting, isn't it, this idea that patients were not allowed to sit in the direct sunlight because it caused lung hemorrhages. And I don't think that's actually true. I've read about it in other sources from this period of time. And supposedly it did something to the circulatory system, and patients could easily have what every TB patient dreaded, which was a lung hemorrhage, which could kill you, even if you were doing well. If you suddenly had a lung hemorrhage, it could kill you. But I find that hard to believe, that direct sunlight could actually, exposure to sunlight could cause a lung hemorrhage. I've never heard that in modern times. Anyway, yeah, so then he's saying, well, can you imagine? I was in Monte Carlo in summer. I was in the direct sunlight all the time, and he had this Russian doctor in Monte Carlo named Mikhailov. I know nothing about him, but apparently he was not a TB specialist. Apparently he didn't advise Dmitri to stay out of the sun. And sorry, I'm looking down here. So, then there's this charming statement, but God is always with him, meaning Mikhailov. He's a lucky guy. Bad things don't happen when he's around. Okay. So what do we have next time? Well, next time we are going to meet a very important woman in Dmitri's life, his nurse. And there's a funny story about her that is not from Dmitri's diaries, but that confirms a story that was told about this sort of legendary nurse that was here. So we'll talk about that next time. And we're going to see Dmitri in a kind of ecstatic state. And there's a specific phenomenon that supposedly was typical of TB sufferers, where they would go into this kind of ecstatic state. And, that does seem genuinely true in his case, but it maybe wasn't related to the TB. Anyway, we'll talk about that. And yeah, here's something I didn't show. So these are call buttons on the wall. Of course, they're no longer connected. One is always tempted to push them anyway. To call the 3 category of people you could call here would be a nurse, a waiter, and a maid, a housekeeper. I think, let me see if in the hallway I can find another one of those. Some of them have little illustrations of the people you could call. I'll have to find one of those later. They're around here and there. I don't see any at the moment. Okay. Anyway, I've been going for 20 minutes. So, here's one that's for a maid. Just kind of looking, come hither, look there, for whatever reason, whoever designed that button. So there are other ones in this quarter for nurse. Yeah. Little things like that I kind of take for granted and I need to remember to include in the videos. So, thank you for watching. Come back next time to meet this fascinating nurse, and I hope to see you then. Bye.